Thanks for being here. I see your beautiful Vincent Van Gogh in the background. I love that.
Yes, that was my husband and I, when we got engaged, or was that from, yeah, when we got engaged as a gift. No, when we got married as a gift, he gave me two of these replicas. They were like actual paint, like it's actual, it's not a print. It's like you can
Really?
feel the texture of it, of that, and another one of Van Gogh's paintings. So I love Van Gogh. And then in our wedding, we had kind of a Van Gogh theme at the reception. So that's kind of like
Oh,
our thing. We've married almost 20 years. This is the first time I've actually had it out because it's just been rolled up
wow.
canvases. So I
That's so
finally
beautiful. You had
like
it all in a can, like rolled up and put
just
away.
rolled up. Yes, it's gone from house. We've lived in like 4 houses since we've been married. And I
Wow.
finally like, I just need to put this on a canvas. So I got an old picture and I literally just stapled it around that picture. And I'm like, there we go. Now it's cute.
Yeah. Good. Better late than never because that is really pretty. My daughter and I were in Toronto last year and watched a performance. So they had some sort of presentation and it was like a big black warehouse and they would cast music. It was
Oh, the
shifting everywhere.
whole like
Have you
the
seen that?
experience thing where it's all,
Yes,
we went to that too here in Houston. It's amazing. Oh my
it
God.
really
It's
is.
incredible.
I just
Oh,
was
so
like this for like an hour and a half. And then
yeah.
Madeline said, should we do it again? I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Totally. Yeah, I took my daughters, my mom and I took my girls down to see that. And usually they're both very like they're very active. They like to move. They're not sit
Yeah.
and watch movie or anything kind of people.
Yeah.
And I showed it to them and they're like, "Oh, that looks really cool." And I'm like, fingers crossed that they actually like this. And they were just enthralled. It was so awesome. I was so glad because I love Van Gogh and
Me
I just
too.
love fine
Yeah.
art. And like particularly like impressionist. That's like
Me too.
Monet. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So I was so excited that they both like it. And now my older daughter has discovered Monet and she's like, it's so beautiful. I'm like, I know,
It's so
beautiful.
It is so beautiful. I had prints in my early before, like I think when I first moved into my own apartment,
Uh-huh.
from Arona, which is like, I don't know, home hardware. And they
Yeah.
were Claude Monet prints, but I'm like, they're so beautiful. And I still have them somewhere. I forget where, but
Yes.
so beautiful. I've even named our bed and breakfast after Giverny, the garden of Monet.
Really? Oh my God.
Really?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
I
Oh my
love it.
goodness.
And one of my favorite quotes is by Van Gogh, which I have often quoted, and I can't remember the exact wording, but it is something like small things brought together make something great, something like that.
Ooh, I like that. I'm gonna have to
I
look that up.
know.
That's awesome. I like that.
It is beautiful. So lovely to have you here. So I want to quickly introduce you, first of all, to everybody that's listening. I have actually had a chat. Yeah, hello, everybody. I've had a chat with Allison on my podcast before, so you can listen back to our conversation. And I was just listening to that actually, and like looking for your bio there, which I want
Oh.
to share, but I couldn't make it stop. So that's why I need the real live one first. So what I wrote was that you're a former classroom educator. Allison Morrow has homeschooled her own kids named, or now probably 14 and 16. Am I guessing?
Almost 17, actually. Yes.
Isn't that weird? Other kids don't grow up, just yours. And she helps us bust homeschool myths. She's helped hundreds of families launch their homeschool adventures or find clarity and confidence in the journeys that have already started through a less is more homeschool mindset. Allison lives in Texas with her husband and daughters, but helps families all over the world bust those homeschool myths through goodschooling.net. Love it.
Thank
You've
you.
been up to a couple things since then. So tell me what you've been up to.
Yeah. Oh, so the biggest thing has been that I started a YouTube channel and I've been utilizing that as much as possible, learning all of the ins and outs and all of the craziness of the YouTube world,
Yeah.
um, just to try to help more families to get out there. The whole, not just simplified homeschooling, although that is absolutely my passion, but just ever since the pandemic, so many families wanting to homeschool, diving into homeschooling through crisis schooling and then kind of getting into it and thinking, ooh, I like the freedom. Yeah, but I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to do it past this year,
Yeah.
so many families now that it's become kind of a more accepted thing for families to try. You have a lot more people interested, but they just don't know how to get started. And so I've been trying to use YouTube to try to just get the message out more. So that has been my big project is building the Good Schooling channel. And then just building more with Simplified Homeschool and our Simplified Homeschool community, where I do coaching and help people on that whole journey. So yeah, those have been the
Who
big
are you seeing, like the difference between 3 years ago, like pre-pandemic, or 4 years ago, whatever it is. But pre-pandemic, the experience of the homeschool world or the community, what shifts have you seen?
I have seen a lot more parents of middle and high school kids saying, we are done with this nonsense. We're done with the bullying. We're done with the wasted time. We're done with the, just the madness of what they're seeing in terms of what's being taught, what's included in the curriculum. It used to be, it seemed to me anyway, that it was quite often elementary was where a lot of parents were first kind of wanting to make that jump. And then particularly with the pandemic, it was the younger kids who couldn't sit on a Zoom for 4 hours and couldn't
Surprise.
sit on a screen. And so that was, during the pandemic, I feel like that was where we saw the most of younger kids, families with younger kids wanting to make that transition, because they're like, my kid can't do what they want my kid to do. And I don't want him sitting on a computer for multiple hours a day, So during the pandemic, it was very much, the younger kids, families of younger kids. But I feel like the last couple of years, I've seen so many more families, particularly in high school and even in like sophomore, junior year, even though they don't have that much time left, parents saying, I'm calling it quits. We are not doing this anymore. How at this late stage of the game, how do we do this? So that has been kind of an interesting shift to try to work with, because it definitely is a very different situation when your kid only has 2 years of school left. You don't tell them to take a year or a month of homeschooling a month of deschooling for every year that they've been in public school, because that's going to take them to like graduation.
Now they're in their gap year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you do that then? Deschooling for kids, or how do you approach that?
My first question tends to be, what kind of a kid do you have? Where do you see this kid going? Is this an academically minded child who likes school? Just because parents choose to homeschool doesn't mean, I think sometimes people kind of tend to assume, we're taking our kid out because they're not cut out for, the academic track. This is a child who's going to go into trades, or this is, maybe a child who struggles academically. Seeing a lot of parents pulling their kids, even though they are academically minded and they do want to do that. So my first question is, which direction do you think they're going to go? Do they want to do college? Are they more trades focused? Do they not really, have a plan yet? And then what kind of a child are they in terms of their learning style? Are they real kinesthetic? Are they, more of a social learner? Are they more of a, conventional learner where that conventional style really fits? And depending on which one of those they take, then kind of the next thing is, how intrinsically motivated is this child? Is this someone that you can set up with a program and they're going to take it, they're going to engage with it because they have that kind of mindset already? Or is this a child who's going to need a very different system, So those are kind of the questions that I tend to ask. And then depending on that, if they really are more academic minded and they are college bound, I tend to not recommend as much deschooling, because really you don't have that much time left. Let's just knock out whatever's left for that transcript in the most fun, most engaging, most, in my mind, simplified, easiest for you to manage, but still giving them everything that they're going to need and giving them some autonomy and some, the opportunity to guide what they're learning.
Bring them back to life.
There.
In whatever way.
Absolutely.
I think that's a deschooling concept in general. But at that point, we're always like, why do you not want to be in the system anymore? Like, what's not working for you? But, when we jump into this deschooling concept, which you have so many great ideas on your website, I'm looking at it again and going, oh yeah, so many different directions of a conversation we could go here. But when it comes to deschooling, oftentimes people say, but my child is bored, or how do I get my child to be motivated? And that's one. And I'm like, can the answer be don't? Don't try to motivate them and let them be bored. Yes. It's not usually the answer, but I try.
Well, and I think a lot of times that is the answer. And I think, it
is.
Parents get, because I do it too, even though I'm the one telling people, trust the process, trust that, it's going to be
Easy for us
okay.
to say, right?
It's easy to say,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I look at my own kid, I'm like, oh my gosh, but when, we have this desire we want to see our kids do well, and we can see the whole, what's ahead of them, where things are going in a way that they can't see. And because we're able to kind of, extrapolate out where things are going, we start getting nervous about how long it's going to take to get there and what needs to happen between now and then. And we want to get it going. We don't want to wait. And we don't want to take our hands off and be
Out of
not
control.
in control. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a control thing. And it's such a big part of parenting in general, just learning how to let go. Let your kids make the mistakes that they're going to make. Let them learn how to be their own person, because this is the safest environment for them to do that in. And the more times they can fail here, where we can pick them up and dust them off and give them a cookie and give them a hug and tell them it's okay and help them fix it.
Yeah.
Then the more prepared they're going to be to fall in the future and know how to pick themselves up and, fix it. And but it's that letting go of the control that is super, super hard. And that's one of the things that parents struggle with the most, for sure.
Yeah. And I actually think, this is something that I haven't actually thought through before until you're saying it right now, but that is actually part of what we need to do for deschooling, because the school system does think that we can create a control around all the different elements of how to create an education, or to make the child learn something, or here's the way we can create a 3-point essay, and we'll teach the child to do it by building a sentence and to learn all the different components. And I get it. And also, when you're working with real children, they're like, I don't want to build a paragraph, or, certain children, some do. And I have those too, but there's, some of them don't want to do things the conventional way. So the school itself has a sense of, I can control things, and therefore education check is done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very top-down model. This is what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to do it. And we're going to do it the way that I tell you, in the time frame that I tell you, for the reasons that I tell you. And it's all about control. It is 100% about control. And even when you think about standardized testing, it's all about control of the information and what we want them to learn, even though it's rarely actually learning. It's just memorizing to check those boxes, but it's absolutely, that whole system is about control. And when that is all that as a parent, that's the only system you've experienced yourself as a student. And it's
take it home. Yes.
But you can't things differently if you don't know there's a different way to do them. And that's the whole beauty of deschooling, is learning about all of these different ways. And until you do that, you will default into that control mode over and over and over. Every time things start going wrong, every time things get frustrating, every time, you'll keep going back to that, taking back the wheel. We're going to do it my way, because you just don't know what else to do.
Right. And even if you have a compliant child, because I have one of those too. If you are, I have 1 out of 4, by the way, but I have a compliant child that was eager to just do the right thing. And yet you're stomping out curiosity and, just general interest and play and all the things that are true building blocks to real learning. And I saw that discussion as well about curiosity. You shared about curiosity, and there's a big thing there: play, imagination, curiosity.
Oh, for sure. When you look at how little kids learn, and that actually, this was really fascinating. I read, and I always forget his name, and I'm going to forget it again. Peter Gray. I actually remembered, psychologist Peter Gray, who studies learning and education and is a huge proponent of unschooling. And he talked about the fact that we're losing sight of what early childhood actually looks like from a psychological and an educational perspective, because formal academic school is starting so early that we're stomping that stuff out even at 3 years old. And so we don't know, we've lost sight as a society of what learning looks like for little kids. And which means that we forget that their whole approach to life, from literally the minute they are born until we stomp it out of them, it's all about trial and error and experimenting. And they're just little scientists that go, I wonder what's going to happen when I do this. What happens when this thing that mom told me not to do? What happens if I do it?
Yeah.
She said what she did what she said she'd do. I wonder if she'll do it if I do it again. It's that dropping
Exactly.
stuff, the tray, in their high chair, or it's touching the hot stove, but it's not, a lot of parents will go, oh my gosh, my child's so disobedient. I'm like, no, your child is a persistent theorist, theoreticist. They're working on the theories and they're creating hypotheses and they're learning about the world by engaging in it. And if we just allow kids to maintain that, then for most kids, and I will fully admit that there's definitely going to be a subset of kids with different kinds of issues that will make this not happen quite the same way. There's always exceptions to the rule.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, human beings are born to be problem solvers and creative thinkers.
Right.
And that's what we do, is we solve problems and we're curious about stuff and we ask questions and we want to figure them out. We just let kids do that. By and large, they're just going to keep doing that.
Right.
And all we have to do is just nudge and steer a little bit here, a little bit there. When they get stuck, give them a couple ideas, stand back, let the process
Let them keep doing
continue.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually for a little while there, I was having so many people, I created a video on Instagram because there was so many people asking me about homeschooling in preschool. And I just, when people would ask me that, I'm just, no.
Yeah.
My answer to you is no. Read to them, play with them, do whatever they want to do, but just no.
Yeah.
School.
That's so funny. I have a video on YouTube that's called something like do not homeschool kindergarten, or why you should never homeschool kindergarten, or something like that. The idea being, you don't get out the books and the curriculum. Anytime I see somebody say, what curriculum should I use for my 3-year-old? I'm like, oh my gosh.
That's the kind of question. I know. How do I chat with you without being judgmental? Okay, let me just please remember where I was at. That's what I do. I go, okay, yeah. No, actually, I wasn't thinking like that at 3. So in some ways, I'm impressed that people are thinking about that stuff. Mostly overwhelmed and exhausted. Yeah. No is the answer. But actually, I have a post that I don't remember what the number is, but something like 56 things you can do with your kindergartner. But for me, I actually realized that the whole point, because if you look at them, they're not school. It's not school. It's just fun. Just have fun. And that probably is the energy that you want to take into the rest of their childhood too. So, really add to that. And yet I found it interesting to read what you were saying about simplified homeschooling, because I have never truly identified as an unschooler, because I input what I think is important as well. And so would you share a little bit about your approach, your method, simplified homeschooling?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was the exact same way. I loved aspects of the unschooling idea, but I just felt like as a parent, I have a responsibility to make sure that when my kids leave, there are certain things they know.
And you want them to know. Yeah.
It's important stuff. And I realized that, again, there are certain kids, and I've got 2 of them, that are not going to be drawn to asking the kind of questions and investigating the kind of stuff that they would need to in order to get the foundation I wanted them to have. And unfortunately, that is because of all the mistakes that I made long ago that, created the kind of mess that we ended up with our homeschooling, which was kind of the basis of how I got to where I am now, working through all that, figuring out what went wrong. And so I realized that while I would love to just totally buy into unschooling, there needed to be boundaries. There needed to be specific things that I was saying, we do have to do these things, but that it was balanced with, but I want to do them the way that you want to, as much as possible. Give them as much input as possible.
Amen, sister. That's exactly how I approached it. If we are going to do it, then how do we do it so it can work for you? I wasn't always good with that either, but that was always my intention.
Learning process.
2 kids way better than the first 2. The key is to have many children to experiment on.
See, you're a scientist. There you go.
Theory. Yeah, it's done. Now I can have many more children. No.
But then also with where even more of their personality and their desire comes in is on those things where it's not as skill-based, and I don't have as big of an opinion, on what they really need. And so I kind of liken the simplified homeschooling approach to when you go bowling and you get to put up the bumpers that you have in the gutter when you go with a little kid,
I
so
never need those.
they can never get a gutter ball. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I do. Absolutely.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah. But it's kind of like that. It's like bowling with the gutters. You've got these boundaries and you play within those boundaries. And those boundaries are where the parent says, here's the stuff that we have to do.
Yeah.
You have to do math. You got to learn basic math. You got to learn how to write a decent sentence. You got to learn how to read at a particular level so that, you're not going to get duped when you go out in the real world. You can discern and learn, and you can, have wisdom when you read. You're able to pick out, the clickbait.
Critical thinking. Yeah.
Critical thinking. Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's balanced with that. And then also with, kind of the things that I think of as rounding our kids out. And I think with homeschooling, a lot of times parents will, we separate, there's homeschooling and then there's real life. And one of the things, again, that I love about unschooling is that it doesn't see a delineation. It says, no, like learning is life. We do it all together. And so when I did simplified homeschooling, I wanted one of the pillars. We have 7 pillars in the homeschooling, the simplified homeschooling approach. One of them is recreation. And that is getting outside, moving your body, having a hobby, finding other things that are outside of, just all of our academic stuff, but also teaching things like rest, teaching things like the importance of daydreaming, which I didn't even know was actually a thing that was important until I read a really, really good book called Self-Driven Child. Such a good book. But they talk about how incredibly important it is to daydream, which nobody does anymore because Solitude. They have that. They've got a phone in their hand. Anytime they get bored, they go straight to their phone. Our brains need that downtime. They need that mind wandering time. And so that was one of the pillars. One of the other pillars was responsibility. So having, a part in the family of keeping the house running. Everybody should have chores. And I think of that not just as life, but as a homeschooling thing, because it's teaching responsibility. It's teaching that everybody works together. We're a team. And in order to make this part of life work, we need everybody else working, everybody working over here together so that it's not all on my shoulders as the mom having to do every single thing. And so simplified homeschooling really takes a very holistic approach and view of education and sees it as this balance of real life, this balance of family virtues and values, the things that your family wants to prioritize, making it possible to do those things. If it's travel, if it's missions, if it's, running a business together as a family, whatever it is, showing that you can do those things and you don't have to sacrifice the learning stuff, because the ways to bring that in while also making sure they're getting the foundation they need in the skill-based stuff, the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, the reasoning, critical thinking, and then letting those other elements, the science, the history, everything else, be driven by the things that your kids are interested in and just what your family does.
Yeah, beautiful. That was a conversation piece I've been listening to lately, is homeschooling really equipping you to live the real life in real time. And I'm like, I think the question should be, are we equipping our children when they're in a 4 walls inside of an institution, equipping you to live in real life? Right. Because I'm taking my kids to the post office and we're talking about what's going on in the economy and in politics. And like, this is like normal stuff for us.
Right.
Everything, like you name it, we talk about all of it. And that's a common thing. Whereas in a school, that's not common. I'm not saying you don't have discussions like this in different classes or at different times, but it's not organic.
No, not at all. And one of the things that I was struck with that's in that same vein was the fact that our education system and a lot of people's thinking about education is still so stuck in the 19th century with this idea that if you don't get it memorized when you're a kid, you're never going to access that information again. It was a time when you couldn't just go out and find anything. And I'm like, we walk around with the whole freaking world in our pocket. Why would we make our kids spend all this time on things that do not apply to them right now, when they can literally at any time look up so much information? And it's not that I'm against memorizing. I think there are a lot of things very worthy of being memorized, but and things that are worthy of being studied. But there are so many things that schools require that still comes out of this idea of education being teacher-centric, being book-centric, and based on this idea that this is the only time that you're going to get this information. That is not world functions anymore. We're light years beyond that now. And so when you look at any kind of education, homeschool, public school, anything, we need to ask ourselves, is this preparing our kids for the 21st century when they can at any point say, oh gosh, you know what I didn't learn? I didn't learn whatever. Gee, I wonder what that is. Let me look it up. And within 10 minutes, you're going to find video after video after video after website. You know, and if it's something you need, like to get a job or to work, you know, to advance in your job or whatever, you're going to be intrinsically motivated to learn that stuff. You're going to want to do it, which means you'll learn it way faster than you would have at 14 or 10 or 8 or whatever, when somebody said,
right here, right now. Yeah. How old is your oldest right now? Is
17 next
17.
month.
Okay.
She's going to be a senior next year. She's a junior this year.
Okay. My third is 17. Actually, my third is a senior and is 17. But my oldest two are in college or in university, and I've seen this in their life. I've seen it in my life, my husband's life, that there are many things we missed. In fact, I think the homeschool mom is probably the greatest benefactor of a homeschool education, no matter how amazing your education was. Because man, are you learning? Like, you are learning all sorts of things you didn't know.
Yes.
So you 100%. Survived.
Right. That idea of there being gaps and things that, you know, and that's one of the things that parents worry about. Oh, I'm not going to know everything that I'm supposed to teach, and they're going to have gaps in their education.
Of course they will. Yes.
You think all the things that are out there to learn, there is literally no way anybody can do it.
Absolutely not.
No, and putting them into school does not mean, oh, they would have learned those things, because
it doesn't, because we know that's not true.
There's so many factors that go into whether or not someone's going to learn something. And if they're scared, or if they're stressed, or if they're sleep deprived, if they're hungry, or if they're just having an off day or whatever, on the day when they taught this, your kid's going to come out with that gap. It doesn't matter if it was in a public school or a homeschool or a private school or what. There are always going to be things that they did not get the first time around.
But I think the question is, what's the goal? Is the goal to not have a gap, or what's the point of the education anyway?
Exactly. If your kid knows how to find what they need to find, they know how to learn, they know how to track down information, they know how to parse out of all of these things that came up on my Google search, which ones are reliable? How can I tell? What should I be balancing here? If they have those skills, then it doesn't matter what the gaps are. They're going to be able to go back and find those things when they need them. And that is the skill that they need. They need to be able to learn. And if they have that, then what else do they need, in a way? You know, as long as they have the skills they need to learn, that sets them up for everything.
That's right. Yeah. Setting up skills, knowing where to find stuff, who to chat with. But, you know, I always think of, is education the intention to become mini gods so that we know everything, or to know how to be the resource person instead of Google? Or, you know, if Wikipedia isn't consulting you for everything, is that an education? Like, you know, so, you know, I go back to the Latin root of education because I like it. It sounds cool. And I actually did do Latin with my kids, because that's first two kids, remember? In fact, my oldest is doing Latin in her university years.
Oh, awesome. That's hilarious.
Yes. But I'll pronounce it correctly. Educato is the root word for education, and it means to raise up. And so I always ask, to raise up what? Like, we're looking to raise up an education system, or a specific province or state's education system. What's the intention behind it? And it's actually to raise up the child in front of you.
Yes, their mind. Yes. Raise them into a being who can take care of themselves and can think for themselves, can reason for themselves, and can figure out how to do what they need to do. Is that not what we do as adults? How often we ourselves come up against something and go, no idea what to do about this. So what do? Just sit there and go, oh no, you know?
Sometimes.
You know what? Okay, so we start there.
Yeah, we start
And
there.
then we
That's
think,
right.
okay, so
Have to do something about that. Yeah.
how are we going to fix this? We call
Yeah.
somebody else who knows how to do it, or we figure
Yeah.
it out ourselves. We
Yeah.
get, I have learned so much about toilets. I don't know why, but all of
Okay,
our
tell me, what have you learned about
know how to
toilet?
replace the plunge, the little thing that flushes it, and I know
Yeah.
how to the whole thing inside. I've done all this stuff because I don't want to pay somebody to come out and fix it when I
Yes.
can probably figure it out myself.
Well done, by the way.
Thank you. Yes, it's very, very handy.
It
Don't
is
have
very
to come to
handy.
your house though, because it is a little bit wonky. I'm still working on my technique. But that's what we want our kids to be able to do when they come up to a problem, be able to say, huh, I wonder how to fix this. I wonder
Yeah.
what can I do to fix this? And then go figure out how to do that. And why do we think that them doing that is any different from how we do it? We all do the exact same thing. We go look up a way to solve this problem.
Yeah. Yeah,
If
that's
we
really
have no
good.
problem worrying about ourselves doing it, then
Yeah.
why would we be so worried? Why would we be so worried about our kids suddenly not being able to do that? Like if we can do it, so can they. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's very good. And actually that entire approach being very independent, that I've seen with it, differently in everyone's homeschool home, but everyone grows a certain kind of independent bone that you don't see necessarily. I mean, you might see it in other ways, in other realms, but it is very common to see homeschool families for the long run or in the long run to have just an independence bone that is unusual. And there's a reason for that. There's a really good reason.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that when you have that mindset of understanding that you're not treating your child as a computer hard drive that you're trying to download all this stuff into, but that you're trying to program them in a way to be able to go solve problems, then you start seeing at a very early age that they can solve more problems than we sometimes give them credit for. And so when you have that mindset, it makes it a little easier, not totally easy, but a little bit
Totally,
easier to
because
let go
we're
of some of
mothers.
the
Yeah.
control, to let go of some of that control and let them try those things and make those decisions and fix those problems as best they can. Forgive my dog who's going crazy. I don't know if you can hear him. Hopefully not. Oh, good. And just let them learn how to learn. And that means stepping back and saying, give it a shot, see what happens. And when you do that,
it is truly hard. I think we're like, our hearts are tied to our kids.
oh gosh,
And
yes.
so when we see them, because I won't go into the details of this specific scenario I'm about to bring up, but one of my girls is dealing with something that takes her out of huge comfort zone, dealing with conflict and having to address conflict and actually advocating for herself. And if you know Enneagram, she's a type 9. So she's really harmonious and gets along with everybody and likes everybody. And now she doesn't have a choice. She has to deal with this conflict. And she's an adult, so I can't do it for her, or at least I choose not to because I know better. And yet I want to deal with the conflict, but instead I'm going to give her the skills to, how do I help you frame it or understand who you are in this situation so that you can advocate for yourself, you can be assertive and appropriate, and also say, okay, we need to deal with things differently, or I need to step up for myself so that other people aren't mistreating me. And that's hard to watch as a mother. I always want to be in there and be on the, how do I control my child's biome so they have a perfectly charmed life? And yet it's not a reality. And so maybe she's being called up to deal with conflict and learn how to be an advocate and strengthen that part of her. And then I can go, maybe she's being called up to be something beyond what I even thought she would be. And so I have to back off, let go of control.
Yeah. I've been dealing with something similar with my 14-year-old, same kind of thing where I don't do the Enneagram thing. So I don't know which one she is, but she's very social. She loves people. She's funny. She's very charismatic. And so same kind of thing. Like she's never met a stranger, she's quick to everybody and she's very friendly. And, but she's had some issues with some mean girl stuff. And we have them in the homeschool community too, because we have every, and I know, isn't that crazy? There's every type in the homeschool community now, and I mean, there always has been, we just haven't seen it but, having to have those hard conversations about, you're not always going to be everybody's cup of tea, and can't always make everybody happy. And just try to instill her with an understanding of how other people operate and how interpersonal stuff works, and giving insight and a little bit of advice, but then just kind of saying,
coaching,
you know how it goes. Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's coaching, but yeah, it's your mama heart hurts when your children hurt, and it sucks.
Yeah.
But again, kind of back to what I said earlier, like this is the time that we want them to be engaging in those kind of things and learning those things.
Yeah.
Because we have the opportunity to be alongside them.
Yeah.
And I think too, even though, you know, like you're saying, your child, she's older, but because you had that time when you were homeschooling and you built that relationship, and that's one of the drums that I'm constantly beating, is relationship over rigor, relationship over curriculum, over all these other things. Because when you build that trust and that connection and that bond and that relationship, then when they go through these things, they actually come and tell you about it. And they might actually ask your advice and listen to it sometimes. And, you know, gives you, so parenting doesn't end just because they leave. It just shifts.
It really doesn't.
It works.
Yeah.
But if you've built that connection and that bond, then you get to keep having that impact and speak into that impact. Yeah.
Do you know Vicki Tillman, the Seven Sisters or the Homeschool High School podcast? Are you familiar?
I've heard of Seven Sisters. And her name sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. She's actually, because she's one of the Seven Sisters. And so she asked me to write for her website. And so I was writing life lessons that I've learned from my homeschool kids. And one of them was what we just spoke to, but now it's lost. I've lost my thought.
Building connection and being able to speak into them. And
actually, and what brought it up for me is that my biggest surprise in this entire homeschooling thing, or really in parenting, is that it's not about parenting. It's like the concept of parenting is very much like I do the right thing, then I get a product at the end. And now I realize, or at least that's the impression I've had. All the parenting books that I've had. And so for myself, I see it as, no, I was called into becoming a mother, and a mother is a very unique relationship. And I'm not going to try and outline all the facets because I've A, not thought of it, and B, don't know that I could cover it all because it has
it's a big topic.
It's a big topic. It's a big relationship, but it's a relationship with another human being who was, for me, placed in my womb. And I didn't choose who that person was. And that person, I mean, I have 4, and just like everybody says, but it's totally true. Very, very different kids. They're very different. And so they came out and I went, oh, cool. Look, she moved a lot in my womb. She must be busy. Nope. Ideas that I had in my mind. Oh, it must be a boy. Nope. Until my 4th, it was. But I thought it must be twin girl. Nope. But you just don't actually know or decide who they're going to be. And that is kind of my experience the entire time, is that you assume that, I just said Enneagram. It's a useful tool. It's not like the only way to understand a person. And there's many different ways. And also the most important one, I think, is you don't fully understand them. I don't think you're going to ever come to a place where you've got it all figured on these people. And same with myself, actually. I've been surprised at my development along the way, that I am not who I thought I was. In grade 6, I thought, oh, I'm really shy. I don't do these 12 things. Now I'm like, what am I doing? I'm doing all sorts of things. Like, I told somebody yesterday that I gave her my list of people that I was asking for podcast interviews. And she's like, why Ryan Reynolds? And I'm like, well, why not?
That's awesome.
So you're
cool.
Cool.
That's hard to ask. Why not?
My husband knows. So what does it matter? Anywho, we're all in movement or growth, and I'm not in control of my child. And that is really where that conversation came from, is even who they are and what they're becoming and what they're being called up to become or do in their life, still not my control.
Yeah. I think parenting, the whole concept of parenting for many, many, many decades has been exactly what you said. It's been focused on a product. Do these things so your child will be like this. And there's been this idea that we can judge a parent based on their child. Like, oh, if a child does this, boy, the parent,
I thought like And
Yeah.
then
Oh
I
my
had a
gosh.
child that made me go, what is going on? Yes.
And that, I think, we're seeing so much happening right now in a good way
Yeah.
in people talking about mental health and talking about particularly mental health in children
Yeah.
and the factors that go into affecting that. And I think one of the best conversations that is coming out of that is the idea of respectful parenting and conscious parenting, and it's not this like woo woo, no boundaries, let your child do whatever they want to do kind of thing, because these
No.
little humans do not have fully formed brains. We cannot trust them to do things.
Well, there are boundaries. There are our gutters. It is what it is. There is.
Yes, they have to have those, and they are wired to need those boundaries. And yes, they push against them, but that's how they grow. It's almost like your immune system needing to push against illness to get stronger. They need to push against boundaries to grow stronger in their own way.
Right.
And but getting away from this idea of my child needs to look a certain way and act a certain way and be a certain way, or I'm a bad parent, we're finally starting to come away from that and saying, this is a fully formed human being. They're not a robot. I can't control them. It doesn't matter what I say or what I do. They have their own personality and they're going to make their own choices. And I shouldn't try to control that. If an adult tried to control another adult, we'd call it out and say, what is this? This is abuse. Do that. But for some reason, for decades, it's been okay to assume that we should do that to children who have no other tools and need us to teach them tools. They don't need us to put them into a box. We need to teach them tools to use, to regulate themselves, to, have good interpersonal skills, all of these various things. We don't need to try to make them into something. They already are who they're going to be. We can't control that as much as we think we can. All we can do is give them the freedom to be who they were meant to be and try to help them become the best version of that by giving them the boundaries they need, by helping them stay curious, by helping them keep that, that natural inquisitiveness and problem solving, creative thinking they were born with intact, and allow that to flourish however it's going to flourish.
Yeah, that is very true. And that is interesting because that was not on my list of things to chat with you about, but that discussion is something that I'm doing is, this is actually what I'm going to be discussing in my next Facebook group or Facebook class. And it is about big emotions and frustration and triggers and big emotions, but for the homeschool mom, because I get as a parent, especially as an earlier parent, why we want to control our child's big emotions or deal with them, because they're threatening. That's why they're uncomfortable. They make us, we feel like, oh, now we're a child again. Our child is speaking to us in a way that we feel like a parent inappropriately spoke to us, or you fill in the blank. But so many possible triggers, but it's us that needs to address our big emotions and figure out how to regulate ourselves, and they will learn. And then we will have the tools to share it with them. And by the way, this was not me for many years. This really wasn't me. And then I learned the good old fashioned way. Like you said in the beginning, as a theorist, I was experimenting on my children.
It's what we do. That's parenting for you. Seriously, that is parenting. Is it not just one giant experiment?
Yeah.
It really is, because nobody has all the answers, and it doesn't matter what worked for one person. That's their child, and yours looks completely different, and you cannot carry over the same principles from one to the other. It just does not work that way.
No, my first child actually said, but I don't want to be an experiment when she heard me.
Bless her heart.
I was doing 100% right with you. I just realized I was wrong about that. And then I discovered that there is not one right way to do all of that, because if it's about a relationship, there isn't a way. Well, there is a way of just learning to
being a relationship. Yeah.
That is the way. And so, but it's not formulaic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And formulas are so much safer. And that's why we keep going back to them. And same thing in homeschooling, why we slide back into that conventional approach, because the conventional approach is all about formula. Yeah. Teach this, test it, teach it, test it, say that you've learned it and then move on. You know, I mean, it's very boxes and compartmentalized and structured and systematized.
Mhm. And
And
I think sometimes we're doing that because we're trying to get the validation of other people. And I know there's many different reasons, but that is one that I commonly hear. And the reason why we build that independent bone or that independent muscle or whatever is the framework is because we are forever going beyond the thing that everybody else is doing and learning how to be okay with being outside the box. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to be outside the box. Like I really am not. I instinctively
yeah,
want
that's not the goal. Right.
it's
Yeah.
not the goal, but I'm just
Yeah.
like, but is it working? Like, is it working for you? Is it working for me? Does this make sense? You know, when my oldest daughter had said to me that she really wanted, and I have another child that also did this later, my third, but my first said, I would like to go to school. I remember thinking, no, I'm a homeschool mom. So, and we have bought this hook, line, and sinker, like, because I'm fully engaged in that. But we are in a specific area where there is no homeschool high school. There is no co-op, there is no activity. Like we're in a small town in a very rural area. And then I was like, oh, what do I do? You know, college, go to college. And she's like, I'm not ready for that. I'm like, that's probably true. My, my least academic kiddo. And then she finally convinced me after 2 essays, 2 years. It was hard for her to convince me. And I still don't think of it as the ideal. However, and this is why I think it was the right thing for her, is because as soon as she got in there, she was there because she wanted to do it okay, what is it really like? What is the construct? What are they expecting from me? She was quickly realizing, she said to me, thank you for homeschooling me in junior high. I can see why this whole, social environment wouldn't be good. And then she said, but here's what I want to accomplish. And she told me why. And then she did in 2 years, she finished 3 years because as soon as she got in, she's like, I'm out. And her final year, she actually theoretically took a gap year, even though it would have been her grade 12 year. And then for 4 or 5 months, traveled in Mexico. So I know you said you weren't familiar with Enneagram, but she's the Enneagram type that is very, very independent and came out of the womb independent.
Sounds
And we're independent. And then we homeschooled her and traveled. And then I was like, okay, this was the right thing for her. But man, that was not the way I would have written the script. It was definitely not how I would have chosen the story. And yet she's the kid I unschooled for in the beginning. And now she's finishing her 4th year of an university program. So go figure.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. My oldest sounds exactly like her. So whatever number she is, that must be what my daughter is too, because
girl, my heart is with you.
so you know my pain.
Oh my goodness. It's hard to mother though, because you're like, I love you. Stop being you for a little bit.
See, we used to laugh that like she was 6 going on to 18. Like she's
100%.
1 foot out the door since she understood the concept of moving away from home and doing your own thing. And literally it started at like 6. And it was New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. New York City was her thing. I'm going to move when I turn 18, moving to New York. I'm like, all right, whatever. But she has always been super independent.
Yeah.
She wanted the convention, same thing. She wanted the conventional school. And she had been fine with homeschooling when it was all she knew. And then when we moved to Texas and we were in a neighborhood with literally 18 kids between her age and my youngest daughter, which is only 2.5 years, and they all went to the blue ribbon school down the street. In it, she heard the realtor say that, Mom, it's a blue ribbon. She didn't even know what that means, but it sounds good. Can I go? It's a blue ribbon school, Mom. It must be good. Can I go? And then next, every single year, can I go? Can I go? Can I go?
How did you deal with it? Because I know we all deal with it differently.
Well, so for us, it has always, the first reason why we wanted to homeschool was originally because of education. The more we learned about education and the deeper my husband and I got into our own faith with God, the more that we felt like we could not in good conscience turn our child's education over to the state. It just was not something we could do. So for many years, the answer was no, not public school, but I will bend over backwards to give you as much of that experience as you want, find you classes so you can be in a classroom environment, And I mean, and every year in August, I would ask my kids, what do you want homeschooling to look like this year?
Yep.
And I remember when she was turning, I think it was going into her 5th grade year, she wanted lockers and a desk and a whiteboard on the wall and an alarm. She wanted a bell to go off to tell us when to go to the next subject. And I mean, the child wanted a classroom, you know? So I said, okay, and you can buy lockers on Amazon. What do you know? And we got desks, the kind that have like the little desk attached to the chair. There was a school that had shut down, like a little church school, and they were shutting it down and they were selling them $10 each. So I got them each a desk. I mean, we set up the whole thing and we did school that way for a whole year because that was what, and my youngest was like she totally didn't care. Like she was, you know, she is the absolute opposite, like you said, total opposite from my daughter. But she was like, this is fun. Like it was play acting for her. It was like playing pretend, you know, let's play school
every day and with mom.
every day. Yeah. But that child, every single year, it was a fight. And here in Texas, in most of the states, when you get to high school, if you start as a homeschooler, it's extremely difficult to transfer homeschool credit into high school. So if you start as a homeschooler, you're pretty much locked in to homeschooling. You can always take your kids out of public and come into homeschooling, but going back in is almost impossible. So, and she knew once we got to high school, that was it. And luckily we have friends that had started a hybrid program. So they go 2 days a week. Nice. And they do all their academics on Tuesday and they do extracurriculars on Thursday. And then during the week, they've got homework that they do at home. And we knew the families that started it, fantastic people, on the same page with them, you know, spiritually, religion, politics, education, the whole thing.
Because she had, you know, tell me what you think, because I don't know if it's the same, but I actually felt like my kids, the ones that wanted to not be in homeschool all the way to high school, was because they wanted something outside of what we were doing. And it wasn't, they wanted to be opposite. There was no rebellious. It wasn't like that. It was just, I want to know what the world's like outside of mom and dad's view of things or their experience of things.
It was that independence. And for her, it's that independence. They want to be out. They want to see what else is going on. They want to be, you know, with other people, not just to be social, but because there's new things, there's stuff going on. It's constant, in a way, it's like constant input of new things, new situations, new environment, new, you know, and so
nerve-wracking though, when you're like, wait, what?
I know. I'm like, how is this not better? Being at home on the couch in your PJs. Come on, you know. Like,
I'm literally wearing yoga pants right now. These last 3 years, I've gone from being very formal online to here I am. Hi. I'm relaxed. But I know I'm with you, except that it's us seeing the freedom because it is freedom. We are experiencing freedom as we're doing this. And that's a totally valid, fair point. And then also they're not necessarily, because actually I heard Julie Bogart say it once, and I thought this was clever, that this is our great adventure. It's not necessarily theirs. And it's not that I think that they should have their, you know, every element of their early childhood should be one big adventure, because some days are going to be boring, because boring is a thing that all humans experience. But so at some point there's also individuating, and there's a, you know, they're becoming their own person. And then how do you fuel that? It's tricky. I don't think there's one way to say there's one right way to do that either.
No, there's not. And again, it goes back to the fact that there are so many factors that go into even just the decision to homeschool, how you raise your kids, like all those things. And you have to take, since homeschooling is just an extension of parenting, you have to take all of these things into consideration when you're deciding for your kid what is right for that kid. And what's right for one child in your family does not mean it's going to be right for the other. You have to look at each child individually. And we tried this program with our younger daughter. It was a disaster. Like it did not work. Not who she is, you know. But again, she was the one that wanted to do it. And I said, baby, you know, are you sure? Like, you understand you're going to be sitting in a desk a lot. Like, there's not the running around time. You don't get to lay on the floor when the teacher's reading a book. You don't, you know, like this is going to be a very different experience, but she wanted the experience. She wanted to see what it was like.
Exactly.
And so I was like, okie dokie, let's see how it goes, you know, and she needed to have that opportunity to see for herself that, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Sometimes it was one of those failing opportunities. She needed to be able to try out that experience and to learn something about herself.
Yeah.
And to learn to say, as much as I wish that was me, that's just not who I am.
That's
Just
really
a very important thing to learn. We all have to be able to learn to see what other people do and how other people are, and be able to admire that and say, oh, that's really neat. I wish I was like that. And then decide, what would it take for me to be that person? Can I be that person? Is that something, if she really wanted to be a sit in a desk and learn kind of person, there are things that she could do to improve in that. Now, because of her dyslexia, her brain it's a completely different thing going on in there than it is for most people. So it still would be a difficult thing, but she could do it if she really wanted to. And so that's true for anything. We, as adults, and again, this is what we do as adults. We look at what other people are doing, or we think about what we wish we were doing, or what we want our career to be, or who we want to be, and go, what would it take for me to get there? And am I willing to do that? And I think it's important to give kids the opportunity to be able to do that, as long as a parent, that it's going to be, that you're okay with whatever other risks might come with that.
Yeah. Exactly. It's always,
I'm totally fine with them trying it at this school, where I know that the people running it are practically family, and that, they love my kids as much as another person can love somebody else's kids, and that there are certain things that I'm not going to have to worry about there. I don't have to worry about my kid being bullied. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen in the bathroom. I don't have to worry about what's going to happen under the bleachers on the football field. Those are things that I was not willing to take a risk with in the public school. And so you still do have to say, I understand what the risks are, and I'm willing to take them, because we don't know, when we put our kids into these situations, what's going to happen. And it's not like every person that she's encountered in that program has necessarily been the influence that I wish it was.
Yeah.
That's, and that's okay, because you have to learn how to deal with those people too. And
this is,
and that's life. Absolutely. So there's definitely that balance of saying, okay, I'm going to let you try this so you can figure it out. But we as parents also need to look at the whole picture and say, what are all the things that could happen here? And am I okay with how this could go?
Do you know, my most academic kiddo was the one that homeschooled all the way through. And that was so funny. Like, it wasn't funny. It was annoying for her that people would say, oh, isn't it too bad that if you were in school, then you could have all these labs in science or in chemistry or in physics or whatever. And she knew that her sister had like 2 labs in chemistry and nothing in biology in the high school, which was even mind blowing for me. Cause I know that we go light sometimes in school, but I was like, really? Okay. But so then my second daughter did an apologia science class every year, and did really well in it. And it's heavy academics, like there's a lot there. And she did really well in it. And she was the one, and she did many other classes and college classes and whatever. And she was the one that did homeschooling through high school and didn't go to a formal school. So go figure.
Yeah.
That's the way it works. But, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Something that you would like to make sure that the person that's on the other side, the homeschool mom that's listening to us, gets either as an encouragement or as something that you focus on that you'd like to share with them, while I check my list to see if we've actually chatted about all the things that
I think the one thing I would say to y'all who are watching this when we're done here, is just to remember that academics is just one slice of the pie. It is not your main. There are going to be times when it is your main focus, but it won't necessarily always be your main focus. And that's okay. Like, there are seasons of life in your homeschool, just like there are seasons of life in your life. I mean, it is all one big pie. There's no homeschooling in the life pie. Like, it's just one big thing. And so there are always going to be times when academics are going to be the focus, but there are probably going to be more times when it is your second priority. And then there are going to be times when it's your third priority. And that's okay, because it's like when our kids were, I don't know if you went through this, but when your toddler goes through that phase where they will only eat mac and cheese, apples, and hot dogs. And you're freaking out because you're like, they're so nutrient deficient. All they'll eat is processed crap. And my child's going to have rickets and they're going to die. Like, like we get this panic. And I remember our pediatrician telling us, I remember because I was panicking about this. And she's like, take a step back and look at the whole week, because you're hyper focusing on what's happening in like this little window. She's like, just take a look at the whole week and you'll realize they actually are eating more than just those few things. I know it feels like it's only those things, but you have to look at the big picture. And that was such a sanity saver for me. And then I realized in homeschooling, it's the same thing. There are going to be times when we hyper focus, and there are going to be times when we have to step back and go, okay, you know what? This is not the season in which we can hyper focus on these things. But when I look at the whole picture, I know that over the 18 years that this child is in this home, they're going to eventually get the things that I need them to get. They're not going to leave here having absolutely no understanding of X, Y, or Z.
So Allison, I was just going to say that toddler is now 14.
Yeah.
And he also includes ramen.
Hey, he's branching out. That's good.
And every once in a while, oranges. So I think we're okay with the rickets. No, that's vitamin C, vitamin D. Anyway, we're good.
So we have to step back and realize that this is it's a marathon. It is a long-term process. And it's very difficult for us sometimes to look at that big picture, because we get so hyper-focused on the day-to-day, the here and now. And when we feel like that, because you will feel like that, you just have to remind yourself, okay, just step back and think about the whole big picture.
Yeah.
And realize that this is just how this season needs to be. And everything cycles, and we'll come back to the academics at another time a little harder.
Really
and it's not that you're not doing academics at these other times necessarily. It's just that it's not necessarily the focus. The academics may be happening at a very low level, at a lower level than you're comfortable with, but it just needs to be that way so that other things that really are more important right now can be prioritized and worked on. And that's okay. That's
perfect. It's the way it was meant to be. It might not be in your control the way you thought it was, but it is the way it's meant to be. So you're actually offering a program. Would you share a little bit about that?
Yes, the Confident Homeschooling Solution. So this is it's a 3-part program. And the idea behind it is that when we look at our homeschool, that whole journey that we're talking about, it has 3 very distinct phases. And there's that launch phase when, typically we just dive in and then we find ourselves sinking and we're not sure why. So the launch your homeschool program aspect of that helps lay that foundation. So obviously those of you who are watching this now, you're probably beyond that point. You've been homeschooling for a while, but if you know somebody who's wanting to start, or maybe this was their first year and they're already like, oh, this was the worst decision I've ever made. I cannot do this.
I've met a couple.
Even if they've already started, launch your homeschool. They can hit pause on their homeschool and go back to the beginning and lay that foundation and then pick up where they left off. It'll be so much better. So launch your homeschool then goes into the deschooling and experience. And that is probably my favorite part because deschooling is so powerful. But the best part about it is that, if you know anything about deschooling, you know that it's a very long process. Like we've been so indoctrinated. It takes a long time to get that stuff out. And the deschooling experience turbo boosts and laser focuses your deschooling experience so that you are getting the benefits of that in weeks as opposed to months or even years. So it cuts that time way, way, way down to free your mind to be able to think of education in these different ways, so that you can see the ability to let go of the control and to be able to do simplified homeschooling, which is then the 3rd phase, the simplified homeschooling framework. And that's my whole program that talks about how to follow these 7 pillars that create a very balanced, very well-rounded approach to education and life, so that you're homeschooling kind of that unschooling with the bumpers, and being able to marry some of that control that we as parents do have to have over our kids' education with that child-driven, interest-driven approach that keeps them motivated, keeps them engaged, and allows them to flourish into that person that they were meant to be. So you can access all 3 of those parts of the program separately. they're all, you know, if you buy them all together, it's obviously discounted because it's a great little bundle.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing to share with those people that you know who have not started or just getting ready to start. But if you've already, you know, you're in your journey already, deschooling experience, so powerful, super easy. It comes straight to your email. You don't even have to go log in anywhere. It just comes to you every week. And it's fantastic. And then the simplified homeschooling framework helps you figure out how to do that. Very, you know, it's very burnout resistant,
Ooh,
very
I like
joy, you know, reviving kind of approach to education. And then we have the simplified homeschooling community that is attached to that if you want further coaching and, you know,
Right.
assistance and kind of implementing all of that.
You are a very good teacher and very clear in how you're doing it with such energy that it's easy to follow. The
It's
first
my
time,
favorite. I love it.
I know, I love this stuff too. I just love being in the world of actually, well, anyways, I won't go into my direction, but thank you. Thank you for sharing, because your energy and the way that you present is very easy to understand. So when I was at the very beginning, I think I was asking you to join me for an interview for the podcast, and you were writing about what your thoughts were around homeschooling. And I remember getting muddled in the emails because I'm like, did she say that or did I say that? Because there were so many things you said that I'm like,
We're on the same wavelength.
yeah. And you're in Texas and I'm in British Columbia. And I'm like, wow, I'll bet you don't have snow on the ground. Am I right? I've got snow on the ground.
No snow.
No.
We lived in Colorado before we lived here.
Okay,
And
so you are familiar.
we've had snow by now for sure. And I miss it so much. I'm very jealous of your snow. Go enjoy it for me.
Well, I'm not sure what to say to that. Okay. I will take your non-snow. We'll definitely take your starry night. I love that. And you know, I think after the recording, I'm definitely going to put that quote about Van Gogh, because it was the most beautiful quote, and it absolutely fits what we're talking about today, about all the things, the different parts coming together. And it's a slow process, but the goal is to keep moving towards those parts coming together and the parts that we were talking about today. So anyways, thank you for joining me today. And everybody can find you at www.goodschooling.net. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Bye, y'all.